To Saudi Arabia, where its interior ministry says forces have foiled a terror plot targeting the Grand Mosque in the holy city of Mecca. 11 people were injured, including 5 security force members and 6 foreigners, after forces exchanged gunfire with one of the suspects, who blew himself up inside a home. 5 others were arrested. The Interior Ministry said 3 different terrorist groups had planned the attack as the Muslim holy month of Ramadan nears its climax. Eyewitnesses say the arrested had been new tenants but were never seen leaving the house.
This is the list of demands published by news agencies. In it, Qatar has 10 days to comply or the sanctions continue. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain and Egypt are demanding Qatar downgrades diplomatic ties with Iran and also sever relations with Hamas, the Muslim Brotherhood and the Taliban. Saudi Arabia and its allies are also calling on Qatar to shut down a Turkish military base in Qatar.
Turkey's defense minister says his country has no plans to review its military base in the Persian Gulf state of Qatar. The Turkish minister said on Friday that any demand for the military base's closure would represent interference in Ankara's relations with Doha. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain have now given Qatar 10 days to comply with their demands, which include paying an unspecified sum in compensation. According to the list, Doha must close down Al Jazeera television, refuse to naturalize citizens from the 4 Arab countries, expel those currently in Qatar and reduce ties with Iran.
In a televised address marking International Quds Day, Hezbollah Secretary General Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah stressed that all the destructive plots in the region only serve the interests of Israel and the United States. He warned that the U.S. and Israel have been trying to erase the Palestinian cause from the heart of the Arabs and the Muslim world on the whole. Nasrallah also dismissed Tel Aviv's aggressive rhetoric, saying Israel can't afford to launch a war against Lebanon or Gaza.
Lieberman has said that Israel doesn't intend to wage a war. Israel is refraining from waging wars in Lebanon and Gaza because it knows very well that such a move would be costly due to the capabilities of the resistance.
Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah praised the Quds Day initiative by the late founder of Iran's Islamic Republic, noting that the event has been marked all over the world since it was declared by Imam Khomeini in 1979.
Got terrorist flags on our streets when people have died from terrorist atrocities in recent weeks. I think it's an absolute disgrace.
When they're shouting from the river to the sea, Palestine should be free. It's not about Jews and Arabs living together. It's just about annihilation of Israel. That's it. And they have the terrorist flag on top of this.
No place for anti-Semitism, says this banner at the counter-protest against the annual anti-Israel Al-Quds demonstration. Members of all political parties are here, including Berlin's interior minister, who is responsible for public peace. Unfortunately, our legal situation means that hate-filled, anti-constitutional demonstrations, like this Al-Quds demo, cannot be forbidden, although we do have strict regulations. We want to show that we do not accept this type of thinking and this type of people in our city. Everything must take place within the German constitutional law, and that includes respecting Jews, Christians, atheists, and all religions practiced in our country, even the Baha'i. And that means recognizing Israel without question. But that's just what the protesters at the Al-Quds demo don't want to do. Israel never existed and will never exist. So you mean Israel doesn't have the right to exist? Yes.
Over to Germany now, where the parliament has approved a law allowing the country's secret services to monitor messaging platforms like WhatsApp.
Now, this is a move that's been referred to by the Interior Minister here in Germany, Thomas de Maizière, as essential when it comes to the fight against terror. We've also heard similar things coming from the European Union summit that's ongoing in Brussels at the moment, from the EU Council President Donald Tusk. He said that authorities need access to this type of information if they're to try and stop future terrorist attacks.
The European Council have also agreed on the need to cooperate closely with the online industry. We are calling on social media companies to do whatever is necessary to prevent the spread of terrorist material on the internet. In practice, this means developing new tools to detect and remove such materials automatically.
On Friday, the Council on American Islamic Relations launched a mobile app allowing victims to report bias incidents. The organization is hoping to get an accurate count of anti-Muslim hate crimes in the United States. Corey Saylor, who runs the group's anti-Islamophobia effort, said, "In a moment of trauma, you're not thinking that you need to go online and enter something, but your phone will always be in your hand."
Starbucks is moving forward with its plan to hire thousands of refugees despite its initial announcement drawing mixed reactions from consumers. On June 20th, World Refugee Day, Starbucks announced that by 2022 it will employ 2,500 refugees in several of its European markets. They include Great Britain, France, Austria, Switzerland, Spain, Portugal, Germany, and the Netherlands. The coffee giant said it had already started the hiring process. Back in January, Starbucks pledged to hire 10,000 refugees to work in its stores worldwide by 2022, a plan that drew praise from some customers but resulted in others vowing to boycott the chain. The move came in response to President Donald Trump's executive order temporarily banning citizens of 7 Muslim-majority countries from entering the U.S. Starbucks also announced it will team up with the International Rescue Committee to help refugees find jobs with other companies.
Iran says Russia can use its military bases to fight terrorists in Syria. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif says permission will be granted on a case-by-case basis. The statement comes as Iranian President Hassan Rouhani is set to meet with Russian President Vladimir Putin at the Kremlin. Now, the pair is expected to discuss several regional security issues, including the war in Syria.
Russia has launched a series of cruise missiles at so-called Islamic State targets in Syria. The ordnance was fired from the Admiral Essen frigate and the Krasnodar submarine from the Mediterranean Sea to IS positions in Palmyra. The strikes destroyed command posts and weapon and ammunition stores, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. Russia is seeking agreement with Turkey and Iran to establish 4 security enclaves to bring about an end to the 6-year war.
Russia is saying that before they launch these strikes against ISIS, which is their claim, it hasn't been independently verified yet, they gave both Israel and Turkey a heads up about these strikes. They did not, however, give the United States a heads up as they've done in the past. Now, Russia's latest show of force against ISIS comes as mounting tensions between Moscow and Washington after a U.S. jet shot down a Syrian plane that dropped bombs near American-backed rebels in Syria a few days ago. ago. Russia and the Assad regime say that Syrian jet was targeting terrorists, which is sort of a catch-all phrase for anybody that the Assad regime views as an enemy there. Now, in response, Russia's military cut all communications with the Pentagon, and Russia said it would treat any U.S. jets west of the Euphrates as a potential target.
In Iraq, government forces backed by the U.S. are on the verge of retaking all of the city of Mosul. But ISIS has mounted a bloody last stand in the few neighborhoods it still controls. Today, a suicide bomber blew himself up while blending in with civilians trying to escape.
We swept into the old city with U.S.-backed Iraqi special forces on a cloud of debris, through the twisted maze of streets where die-hard ISIS fighters have dug in. When the roads narrowed too much, we had no choice but to continue on foot.
This is just a hint of the destruction in the old city. The cameras really can't do it justice. It just goes on forever, for miles. Just whole buildings, whole neighborhoods have been wiped out. This is what it costs to get rid of ISIS.
And yet, the fighting continues, with Iraqi forces evacuating their wounded, while leaving bodies of ISIS fighters to lie where they fell.
There are still mortars and gunfire that are flying around in these neighborhoods as we try to pass through. We just had to take cover as we heard one come in and exploded just a couple buildings away.
No one knows how many residents have weathered the 8 months of fighting. Earlier this week, ISIS militants blew up the famous Al-Nouri Mosque rather than surrender it to Iraqi forces. It's where the group's leader, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, first declared the creation of the so-called caliphate 3 years ago.
The Russians are now saying that Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is dead. What do you think?
He's not important anymore, said General Abdul Ghani al-Assadi. As far as we're concerned, he's just another ISIS fighter.
Chinese Coast Guard ships have again sailed close to a group of disputed islands in the East China Sea. Japan's Kyodo News Agency reports 4 Chinese vessels entered waters surrounding the islands known as Senkaku in Japan and Diaoyu in China on Saturday morning local time. According to the report, the ships left after 2 hours. Now, this marks the 16th time this year that Chinese vessels have been spotted near disputed territory. The Director General of Japan's Foreign Ministry called the Chinese embassy in Tokyo in protest, saying the islands are Japanese territory. The uninhabited islands have been a constant source of tension between Tokyo and Beijing as both sides claim the islands as their own territory.
North Korea denies that it treated Otto Warmbier cruelly while he was imprisoned in the country. The regime's state-run media claims he was not tortured or beaten during his time in captivity. Pyongyang's foreign ministry called the 22-year-old a victim of the Obama administration's policy of strategic patience, as the government never requested his release. Mr. Warmbier was in a comatose state upon his arrival back in the U.S., died less than a week after his release. Both Warmbier's family and the U.S. government say he died due to grave mistreatment during his detention in North Korea.
The U.S. military said it failed to intercept a ballistic missile during its most recent test. On June 21st, a medium-range ballistic missile was launched from a test range in Hawaii at 7:20 p.m. local time. The USS John Paul Jones, a guided missile destroyer, detected and tracked the missile. However, while the ship launched the interceptor, it failed to shoot down the target. This was the second time the U.S. military has attempted an intercept with the SM-3 Block 2A. The previous attempt, back in February, was successful. The failed test was conducted in cooperation with Japan's defense ministry. The U.S. and Japan are jointly working to develop an interceptor to shoot down medium-range ballistic missiles. The two countries have been investing in technology to counter North Korean missile threats.
Two of the U.S. military's E-4B planes, commonly called the Doomsday Plane, were damaged and knocked out of service recently in a tornado at Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska, according to U.S. military officials. The E-4B is the military's National Airborne Operations Center, and if there's a national emergency or attack, the plane would serve as the command and control hub for the President, Secretary of Defense, and Joint Chiefs. The military has 4 E-4Bs in the fleet, so now half of the fleet is not operational. The official said the mission can still be accomplished with the 2 aircraft grounded.
Earlier this month, some branches of the military started giving sensitivity training to officers and civilian employees on how to assist and include transgender troops. But now Defense Secretary Jim Mattis is considering stalling the policy that allows transgender people to enlist altogether. The ban on transgender service members was lifted last year thanks to a directive from former Secretary of Defense Ash Carter.
Transgender Americans may serve openly, and they can no longer be discharged or otherwise separated from the military just for being transgender.
A ban on transgender troops enlisting was supposed to be lifted on July 1st, 2017. But leaders from the Army, Navy, Air Force, and Marines have reportedly asked Mattis to push the deadline back by as much as 2 years. A Pentagon spokeswoman says Mattis is still making his decision.
Almost 30 million people around the world are suffering from drug addiction. That's according to an annual UN report. Opioids are named as the most harmful drug type. The document says that the marked increase in global opium production is primarily due to rising poppy yields in Afghanistan.
10 years ago, it was a problem. 5 years ago, it was a catastrophe. Now, it is a global epidemic. Afghan opioids are trafficked everywhere via well-oiled smuggling routes. North to Russia and Europe, east to Asia, west to the Middle East, Africa and the Americas. The opium industry of Afghanistan is killing tens of thousands worldwide every year. Millions of Afghans, there's not much of a choice. Work is scarce, other crops are riskier and less profitable. Heroin can both kill and feed.
When you go there in the opium season, you see schools empty, and you see universities even empty, where Afghans are leaving schools and university for 15 to 20 days to work in the opium fields and find employment.
1 in 10 Afghans is directly involved in the opium industry. Now, consider the families, children that they feed, and the sheer size of the problem becomes evident. Where do you even begin? Since the NATO invasion, it has exploded. This year's opium harvest could well be the largest yet.
We finally know what caused the fire that swept through Grenfell Tower in West London, a faulty fridge. The fridge manufacturer Hotpoint hadn't recalled that model prior to the fire, but it's now asking customers to check their model numbers and contact the company. Police are still trying to determine how the June 14th blaze spread so quickly. So far, samples of cladding and insulation collected from the building have failed safety tests. Authorities are conducting similar safety tests on 600 buildings across the UK to determine if the same combustible cladding was used in their construction. As of Friday morning, they found it in 11 residential buildings. At least 79 people died or are presumed dead as a result of the Grenfell Tower blaze. Police are considering criminal charges, including manslaughter.
Hanging outside while enjoying a favorite drink or snack is one of the many nice things about summers. However, a Swedish man recently realized even such a routine activity is not without hazards. Richard Walter explained to the Swedish media outlet Aftonbladet that while eating grapes from the IKEA-bought stainless steel serving bowl, he smelled smoke and then reportedly came to the realization the bowl sitting in the sunlight was the source. A translation by the local quotes him as saying, "I saw it was burning in the grape bowl. How is that possible? I thought, then I saw there was one intense point where the sun hit the twigs, and that's where it started." He tried to replicate it with a piece of paper and posted a Facebook video that appears to show the paper catching fire when placed on the hot bowl. According to Business Insider, IKEA is reportedly now investigating the claim that sunlight reflecting off the bowl's surface can start fires.
The theory of evolution is being banned from Turkish high schools. A Turkish educational official recently announced the changes to the country's national curriculum, saying, quote, "We have excluded controversial subjects for students at an age unable yet to understand the issue's scientific background." The measure has reportedly already been approved by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. It calls for removing chapters on evolution from biology course books, and overall, the curriculum changes could result in less secular education in Turkish schools. That's cause for alarm for some Turkish citizens. The country was founded in the 1920s under strict secular ideals. Stripping evolution from school curriculum seems contradictory to that. Critics say this is an attempt by Erdogan to move the country toward a more Islamist governance. While Erdogan has served in Turkey's government under various roles, the number of religious vocational high schools has increased from roughly 60,000 to over 1.6 million. And other members of Erdogan's AKP party have been particularly vocal against evolution. Earlier this year, the country's deputy prime minister said, quote, "Scientifically, the theory of evolution is already an archaic and disproven theory."
Recently, Johnny Depp apologized for the joke he made about assassinating President Donald Trump. The incident took place on Thursday at a Glastonbury festival in Britain, where the 54-year-old introduced the screening of his 2004 film, The Libertine.
The last time an actor assassinated a president. I want to clarify, I'm not an actor.
On Friday, Depp made an apology via a statement. The statement read, "I apologize for the bad joke I attempted last night in poor taste about President Trump." He continued to say, "It did not come out as intended, and I intended no malice. I was only trying to amuse, not to harm anyone."
More than 100 people are missing in China after a landslide that buried 40 homes. A rescue operation is now underway as authorities scramble to locate people beneath the debris. It is believed that heavy rain in Sichuan province in southwestern China caused the side of a mountain near Chinmo village to collapse. The landslide blocked a 2-kilometer stretch of river, according to local media, and bulldozers have been brought in to move the earth and rubble that has buried the surrounding area. According to reports, more than 400 rescue workers and police were drafted in to aid the clean-up operation as the search for survivors continues.
We're back in this way right here. We're out weeding, touching up these graves for Father's Day.
A weekly work detail at this Polk County cemetery last Monday took a potentially dangerous turn.
This happened out of nowhere because like every day we work with him and he seems fine.
The detail officer watching this group of 6 inmates passed out.
We knew something wasn't right with him.
After saying he did not feel well, even telling the inmates where his phone was in case something happened. And sure enough, something did.
I happened to look up and I seen the officer going, he was going to his knees in the spot right behind you. And when I seen him going down, I was like, I said, "Hey, you all right?"
I was one of the ones that actually ran back and got somebody else.
And acted quickly.
He had his face down, he was breathing a little hard or whatever, and so we went over there and we turned him over and made sure he was okay.
Making split-second, possibly life-changing decisions.
First we took his gun belt off and let his gun belt to the side, and then we pulled his vest apart, and then we figured we better take it off in case I had to do CPR on him or something like that because he was in bad shape.
They found his phone in his pocket and dialed 911.
He was out for a minute and he wasn't really breathing. Then when he started breathing, he was breathing right, just real heavy and real fast.
His belt with gun, cell phones, and county van all within the inmate's reach.
Anything could have been done. Anything could have happened, but all the right things happened, and that's what makes that whole day just so much better.
Even though they wear stripes and he wears a badge.
They really stepped up in a time of crisis and showed that they care about my officers.
At that moment, the officer they consider family was hurting.
When that happened, in my opinion, it wasn't about who was in jail and who wasn't. It was about, a man was going down, we had to help him.
On Monday, we first brought you the story of these 6 inmates. Since then, thousands of you have headed over to our Facebook page to leave comments on this story. 99% of the comments are positive. So today we came back here to the Polk County Jail to let the inmates see what you are saying about them.
From John Smith, time served on good behavior. Hey, thank you, John. We need that.
As they read through pages of Facebook comments printed off for them to read in jail.
Right here, it says, give them all a second chance. They showed a genuine concern and passion for another human being.
These 6 inmates couldn't believe they're receiving so many positive messages and calls from their family.
And they was like, "Oh, we're so proud of you and stuff, and it's just real amazing, the reactions of people, what they was doing for all of us."
We told the inmates since our first story aired Monday, they have now been featured by the New York Times and Time Magazine and a long list of news outlets around the world. On our Facebook page, they have been nicknamed the Marvelous Six, and others wrote, "Way to go, inmates, such a blessed story, and there are still good people out there." One inmate even knows who he wants to play him if their story becomes a Hollywood movie.
Danny DeVito. Yeah, Danny DeVito, you know.
But on a serious note, when the officer monitoring them collapsed under the bright sun in the middle of a Polk cemetery, they say they didn't even consider running.
One of us, now after everything went down, I was sitting there cutting up going, oh man, it was, so worried about the officer when he went down that not one time did any of us ever thought about running.
Especially since they say they just want to serve their time and then walk out of jail.
Really ain't none of us in here for nothing serious or major, so why turn something so small into something so big?
And after reading all of these Facebook comments today, several of those inmates said they hope this positivity continues once they're outside of jail and they're not stereotyped as being an inmate who served time here in Polk County.